For years I killed myself working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything to pay for my daughter's dream wedding in Houston. Then her grandfather stood up at the reception and made a toast that destroyed my world. One DNA test later, I discovered I'd been living the biggest lie of my life. My wife, my brother, half the family, they all knew. Now they're about to learn what happens when you betray a Texas man who's got nothing left to lose. My name is Dalton Reed. I'm 47 years old, and I live in Houston, Texas. For the past 4 years, I've been working double shifts at the oil refinery and picking up weekend construction gigs to save every penny I could. Not for myself, mind you. Every aching muscle, every missed dinner, every exhausted night was for Sierra, my 24-year-old daughter. She'd always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and I was determined to give it to her. Sierra is everything to me. Smart as a whip, beautiful inside and out, with a laugh that could light up the darkest room. When she got engaged to Colton Hayes last year, I knew I had to make their wedding perfect. Colton's a good kid, works in tech, treats Sierra right. They deserve the best start possible. The wedding planning consumed our lives for months. Nora, my wife of 26 years, threw herself into every detail with the enthusiasm of a military general. Flowers, decorations, catering, music, she handled it all while I handled the bills. And boy, were there bills. The venue alone cost more than my truck, but seeing Sierra's face when she walked through that historic mansion in River Oaks made every overtime hour worth it. Vernon Walsh, Nora's stepfather, inserted himself into the planning process early on. At 67, he still carried himself like the successful businessman he'd once been. Vernon had always been close to our family, maybe too close if I'm being honest. He had opinions about everything, the guest list, the menu, even Sierra's dress. But Nora always defended him, saying he just wanted to be involved because he'd missed out on so much with her own childhood. The night before the wedding, as I sat in my garage going over the final payments, I felt a sense of accomplishment I'd never experienced before. 4 years of sacrifice, 4 years of grinding, and tomorrow my little girl would have the wedding of her dreams. I'd done right by her. I'd been the father she deserved. If only I'd known that in less than 24 hours, everything I believed about my life, my family, and my identity would come apart at the seams. If only I'd known that Vernon's toast at the reception would be the first domino in a chain reaction that would destroy everything I held sacred. But I didn't know. Nobody could have prepared me for what was coming. The wedding day itself was perfect, or so I thought at the time. Sierra looked absolutely radiant, walking down the aisle in her grandmother's restored lace dress. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and the reception at the country club was everything we dreamed it would be. 300 guests, live band, open bar, the whole 9 yards. I felt like the king of the world watching my daughter dance with her new husband. The toast started after dinner, and they were going beautifully. Colton's best man had everyone in stitches with stories from their college days. Sierra's maid of honor brought tears to half the room, talking about their friendship. Then Vernon stood up, and something in the atmosphere shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vernon began, his voice carrying that confident tone he used in business meetings. "I've watched this beautiful young woman grow up, and I have to say, seeing her today fills my heart with pride." I smiled and raised my glass, expecting the usual grandfather figure speech. But then he continued, "You know, people always say Sierra has her father's determination and her mother's grace. But looking at her tonight, I see something special, something that runs deeper than what we usually call family traits. I see the qualities that truly matter, the ones that come from the bonds we choose to honor." The words felt strange, loaded somehow. I glanced at Nora, who had gone pale and was gripping her wine glass like her life depended on it. Vernon raised his glass higher. "Sierra, you embody the very best of what family really means. Not just the name you carry, but the love that shaped you, the guidance that formed you, and yes, the blood that flows through your veins. You are everything I hoped you would become." The room erupted in applause, but I felt like I'd been sucker punched. The blood that flows through your veins? What the hell was that supposed to mean? I looked around and noticed several guests exchanging glances, their expressions unreadable but somehow knowing. Nora excused herself immediately after Vernon's toast, claiming she needed some air. I found her outside by the fountain, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "What was that about?" I asked her directly. "What was what about?" Nora replied, not meeting my eyes. Vernon's speech. That comment about blood. You look like you'd seen a ghost. Nora forced a laugh. You're reading too much into it, Dalton. Vernon gets emotional at family events. You know how he is. But I didn't know how Vernon was, and that wasn't emotion I'd heard in his voice. That was something else entirely. Something that made my stomach turn and my mind race with possibilities I didn't want to consider. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. I went through the motions, cutting cake, more dancing, saying goodbye to guests. But Vernon's words kept echoing in my head. The more I thought about them, the more wrong they seemed. And the more I watched Nora's behavior, the more convinced I became that she was hiding something. That night, after we got home and Sierra and Colton had left for their honeymoon, I sat in my recliner staring at the wall. For years of working myself to the bone, for years of sacrifice and planning, all for a day that should have been pure joy. Instead, I felt like I'd been played for a fool. Something was very wrong with my family, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and a determination that felt like steel in my gut. Nora was already up, bustling around the kitchen, making coffee like it was any other Sunday. But it wasn't any other Sunday, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. We need to talk, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Nora glanced up from the coffee maker. About what? About Vernon's toast. About your reaction. About whatever the hell is going on that you don't want me to know about. She sighed and poured herself a cup, not offering me one. Dalton, you're making something out of nothing. Vernon was just being emotional. Bull, I said flatly. I've known that man for over 20 years, and I've never seen him act like that. And I've definitely never seen you react the way you did. Nora's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her cup. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. I stepped into the kitchen, my voice firm but controlled. What did Vernon mean about Sierra's blood? Why did you look like you'd seen a ghost? She turned away from me, staring out the window at our backyard. You're paranoid, Dalton. The stress of the wedding, all that overtime you've been working, it's getting to you. That's when I knew for certain she was lying. The old Nora would have met my concerns head on, would have talked through whatever was bothering me. This defensive, evasive woman wasn't my wife. Or at least, not the version of her I thought I knew. Fine, I said, my voice deadly calm. If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself. I walked out of that kitchen with my mind made up. I'd spent my entire adult life trusting people, taking their word at face value, believing that the people who claimed to love me wouldn't lie to my face. That ended now. I drove to the local library and spent 3 hours researching DNA paternity tests. The process was simpler than I'd expected. Just a cheek swab or hair sample. Mail it in, wait for results. No court orders, no permission needed from anyone else. Just a father wanting to know the truth about his daughter. The hardest part was getting Sierra's DNA without raising suspicion. She and Colton had left for their honeymoon in Hawaii, but her childhood bedroom was still exactly as she'd left it. I found what I needed in her old hairbrush, still sitting on the dresser where she'd left it months ago. As I carefully collected those strands of blonde hair, I felt like I was betraying her somehow. But I had to know. A man has a right to know if the child he's raised, loved, and sacrificed for is actually his own flesh and blood. I ordered the most expensive, fastest test available. Rush processing, guaranteed results in 72 hours. Money I'd normally hesitate to spend, but this wasn't normal circumstances. Walking out of that FedEx office with a package in their hands, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. In 3 days, I'd have answers. In 3 days, I'd know whether my entire life had been built on a lie. 72 hours felt like 72 years. I went through the motions at work, nodding when my supervisor talked, operating machinery on autopilot, counting down every minute until I could check my email again. Nora kept trying to act normal, making dinner conversation about Sierra's honeymoon photos and Colton's new job prospects. I played along, but inside I felt like a man waiting for his execution. The email arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was in the refinery break room when my phone buzzed with the notification. My hands were actually shaking as I opened the message and clicked the link to view my results. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at those numbers until they burned into my retinas. 0%. Not 5%, not 15%, not even 50%. 0. Sierra wasn't my daughter. The girl I'd raised from a baby, worked 2 jobs to support, walked down the aisle just 4 days ago. She wasn't mine. I sat in that break room for 20 minutes, just breathing. Other guys came and went, probably thought I was having a heart attack or something. Hell, maybe I was. My chest felt tight enough. But then something else kicked in. Not grief, not despair, pure, burning rage. I'd been played. For 24 years, I'd been the fool in someone else's game. For years of working myself into the ground for a wedding, thousands of dollars for a celebration of a lie. When I got home that evening, Nora was in the living room watching some cooking show. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw her face change when she registered my expression. "We need to talk," I said, holding on my phone with the test results displayed. The color drained from her face like someone had opened a valve. "What is that?" "DNA test results. Sierra isn't my daughter." My voice was steady, controlled, but she could hear the steel underneath. "Want to explain that to me?" Nora's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Dalton, I can explain, Dash. 24 years. I interrupted, my voice rising. 24 years I've been raising another man's child. For years I've been killing myself to pay for her wedding. And you've known the whole time, haven't you?" Tears started streaming down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. Those days were over. "Who is it?" I demanded. "Who's her real father?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "It's not what you think, Dash. It's Vernon, isn't it?" The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. "That's why he's always been so involved. That's why he was so proud at the wedding. That's why you both looked like you wanted to disappear when he made that toast." Nora buried her face in her hands, sobbing. But she didn't deny it. I looked at this woman I'd shared a bed with for over 2 decades. This woman I'd trusted with my life, my heart, my future. She'd stolen everything from me. My youth, my money, my faith and family. She'd made me complicit in my own humiliation. "Pack your bags," I said quietly. "I want you out of my house tonight." For the first time in our marriage, I meant every word I said. Nora left that night with one suitcase and a lot of tears, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. I had bigger problems to solve, starting with getting the whole truth about Vernon and how long this deception had been going on. But first, I needed to talk to someone I trusted, or thought I trusted. My brother Garrett had always been the one person I could count on for straight talk. 3 years older than me, he'd been my best man at my wedding and Sierra's favorite uncle. If anyone knew family secrets, it would be him. So the next morning, I drove over to his auto repair shop in Bel Air. "Dalton," Garrett called out from under the hood of a Chevy Silverado. "What brings you by? You look like hell, brother." "We need to talk," I said, glancing around at his mechanics. Privately. Something in my tone must have warned him because his smile faded. He wiped his hands on a greasy rag and led me into his small office behind the service bay. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door. I pulled out my phone and showed him the DNA test results. "Sierra isn't mine. She's Vernon's daughter." The reaction I expected was shock, outrage, maybe some brotherly support. What I got was Garrett looking down at his boots and saying nothing for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Garrett," I pressed. "Did you hear what I said?" "Yeah, I heard you." His voice was quiet, almost ashamed. That's when it hit me like a sledgehammer. You knew, didn't you?" Garrett finally looked up, and I saw guilt written all over his face. "Dalton, it wasn't my place to dash." "How long?" I demanded, standing up from my chair. "How long have you known that I've been raising another man's child?" "Since before she was born," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Nora and Vernon together at a hotel in Galveston. This was about 9 months before Sierra came along." The betrayal hit deeper than Nora's lies, deeper than Vernon's arrogance. My own brother had watched me struggle for over 2 decades, had seen me work myself to the bone, had attended Sierra's birthday parties and school events, all while knowing I was living a lie. "You watched me kill myself working 2 jobs," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You watched me sacrifice everything for that wedding. And you said nothing." "I tried to tell you once," Garrett said desperately. "Remember when Sierra was about 10? I started bringing it up, but you were so happy, so proud of being her father. I couldn't destroy that. That wasn't your choice to make." I exploded, slamming my fist on his desk. I had a right to know. I had a right to decide what to do with my own life. Garrett flinched, but didn't back down. "What would you have done, Dalton? Really? Would you have divorced Nora and abandoned a 10-year-old girl who thought you were her daddy?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Because he was right about one thing. I wouldn't have abandoned Sierra. But I might have made different choices about everything else. I might not have worked myself into the ground. I might have demanded the truth from Vernon. I might have had the chance to father my own biological children. Get out of my sight, I said quietly. And don't come around my house anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a brother. I walked out of that shop feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My wife had betrayed me. My daughter wasn't mine, and my own brother had been complicit in the deception. The only question left was how deep this conspiracy went and who else had been laughing at me behind my back. That evening, I drove to Vernon's house in River Oaks, not caring that I probably looked like a man on the edge of a breakdown. Because I was on the edge, and Vernon Walsh was about to find out what happened when you pushed Alton Reed too far. He answered the door in his typical attire, pressed khakis and a polo shirt, looking like he'd just stepped off a country club golf course. His expression shifted from surprise to wariness when he saw my face. "Dalton," he said carefully, "this is unexpected. We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into his marble-floored foyer. "About Sierra. About the truth you've been hiding for 24 years. Vernon closed the door slowly, buying time. "I'm not sure what you mean." I showed him the DNA results on my phone. 0% probability of paternity. "Want to explain that?" His face didn't change much, but I caught a flicker of something. Not surprise, not denial, but almost relief. Like a man who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long. "How did you find out?" he asked. "That's your response?" Not denial, not explanation, just how did you find out? I stepped closer to him, using every inch of my 6'2" frame. "You arrogant piece of garbage. How long did you think you could get away with this?" Vernon straightened his shoulders, showing that businessman backbone I'd once respected. "I never meant for it to happen, Dalton. Nora and I, we had history before she met you, Dash." "History?" I interrupted. "She was your stepdaughter. You were married to her mother when Sierra was conceived." "It was complicated," Vernon said, but his voice lacked conviction. "These things happen. These things happen." I repeated, my voice rising. "You stole my life, Vernon. 24 years of my life. For years of killing myself to pay for that wedding. And you have the nerve to say these things happen." For the first time, Vernon looked genuinely uncomfortable. "The wedding was beautiful. Sierra looked radiant. You gave her a perfect day. I gave your daughter a perfect day." I corrected. "With MY money, my sacrifice, my blood, sweat, and tears. While you sat there making your little speeches about blood and family bonds, knowing the whole time you were talking about your blood and your family bond." Vernon's mask finally slipped, and I saw the man underneath. Not the respected businessman, not the caring grandfather figure, but a selfish predator who'd built his happiness on other people's pain. "What do you want, Dalton?" he asked. "Money? Some kind of arrangement? We can work something out, Dash." I grabbed him by the shirt front and slammed him against his own front door. "What I want is 24 years of my life back. What I want is to never have met you or your lying stepdaughter. Since I can't have either of those things, I'll settle for making sure everyone in this city knows exactly who Vernon Walsh really is." His eyes widened with genuine fear for the first time. "You wouldn't. Think about Sierra, about her reputation, Dash. Sierra's going to learn the truth one way or another," I said, releasing him with a shove. "The question is whether she hears it from me or reads about it in the newspaper when I'm done destroying you." I walked out of that house with a plan forming in my mind. Vernon Walsh thought he was untouchable, thought his money and connections could protect him from consequences. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, I woke up with crystal clear focus. Vernon Walsh had built his reputation on being a respected businessman and community leader. Time to show Houston exactly what kind of man he really was. But I needed more than just my word against his. I needed evidence that would bury him so deep he'd never crawl out. I started by hiring a private investigator named Jake Martinez, a former Houston police detective who specialized in corporate fraud and personal scandals. His office was in a strip mall near the Galleria, nothing fancy, but his reputation was solid gold. "I need everything you can find on Vernon Walsh," I told him, sliding a retainer check across his desk. "Financial records, business dealings, personal relationships, everything." Jake studied the DNA test results I brought him. "This is about paternity fraud. This is about a man who's been playing games with my life for over 20 years. I want to know every dirty secret he's got buried. Within 48 hours, Jake had struck gold. Vernon's construction company had been overcharging the city on municipal contracts for years, padding estimates, and using substandard materials. There were also irregularities in his tax filings, offshore accounts in the Caymans that weren't being reported to the IRS. Your friend's got his hands in a lot of cookie jars, Jake said, spreading the documents across his desk. This is enough to get him investigated by the feds. But the real treasure was in Vernon's personal life. Jake had found hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even jewelry purchases that painted a clear picture of a man who'd been having affairs for decades. Not just with Nora, but with at least 3 other women, including his current secretary. He's got a pattern, Jake explained. Targets vulnerable women, usually ones with financial problems. Promises to help them out in exchange for companionship. Perfect. I had Vernon dead to rights on tax evasion, municipal fraud, and a history of predatory behavior. Time to let Houston's business community know what kind of man they've been dealing with. I started by anonymously sending the financial documents to 3 different reporters at the Houston Chronicle. Then I mailed copies to the city attorney's office and the Harris County District Attorney. By the end of the week, Vernon Walsh would be radioactive. But I wasn't done yet. The man had stolen 24 years of my life. I was going to make sure he paid for every single day. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. I was at the refinery when my phone started buzzing with news alerts. Houston businessman under investigation for municipal fraud. Read the headline from Channel 2. By noon, every major news outlet in the city was running the story. I took my lunch break early and drove to Vernon's office building downtown. The parking lot was swarming with news vans and reporters. I parked across the street and watched the show with grim satisfaction. Vernon emerged from the building around 2 p.m., flanked by what looked like expensive lawyers. Even from a distance, I could see the strain on his face. This was a man who'd never been held accountable for anything in his privileged life, and reality was hitting him like a freight train. My phone rang. It was Sierra, calling from Hawaii. "Dad," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm seeing things on the news about Grandpa Vernon." "What's going on?" This was the conversation I'd been dreading. "Sweetheart, there are some things we need to discuss when you get back. Some family matters that are going to be hard to hear." "Is this about you and Mom?" Someone posted on Facebook that she's staying at Aunt Linda's house. I closed my eyes. Small towns and big cities. Gossip traveled at the speed of light in both. "Sierra, I need you to enjoy the rest of your honeymoon. When you get back, we'll sit down and talk about everything. Okay?" "Dad, you're scaring me." "I know, baby. But right now, just focus on being happy with Colton. We'll sort everything out when you're home." That evening, I got a call from Jake Martinez. "Your boy Vernon's trying to liquidate assets. Transferred $250,000 to an account in the Caymans yesterday. Looks like he's getting ready to run. Can you track where he's going?" "Working on it. But Fletcher, you should know, he's hired some serious legal muscle. This isn't going to be just a news story anymore. They're going to come after you for harassment, maybe defamation." "Let them come," I said. "I've got nothing to hide." That night, I sat in my empty house looking at wedding photos from just a week ago. Sierra looked so happy, so radiant, so blissfully unaware that her entire family was built on lies. In a few days, she'd know the truth about Vernon, about Nora, about her own parentage. Part of me wondered if I was doing the right thing, destroying her illusions along with Vernon's reputation. But then I remembered 24 years of being played for a fool, for years of killing myself to pay for a lie, and my resolve hardened. Vernon Walsh had made his choices. Now he was going to live with the consequences. Sierra and Colton returned from their honeymoon on a Thursday, and I could tell from her phone calls that the news about Vernon had reached them even in Hawaii. She wanted answers, and she deserved them. I arranged to meet them at my house that evening, along with someone else who needed to hear the truth. I tracked down Vernon's mother, Willa Walsh, an 89-year-old woman living in a senior community in Kingwood. When I called her that morning and explained what her son had done, her response surprised me. "I've been waiting for this day for 20 years, Willa said, her voice sharp despite her age. "Vernon's always been selfish, but what he did to you and that girl was unforgivable." Now she sat in my living room in her wheelchair, flanked by Sierra and Colton on the couch. I prepared myself for this moment, but seeing Sierra's confused, frightened expression still twisted my gut. "Dad, what's going on?" Sierra asked. The news about Vernon. Mom's staying at Aunt Linda's. You looking like you haven't slept in weeks? I took a deep breath and handed her the DNA test results. Sierra, there's something you need to know about your parentage. I'm not your biological father. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at the paper, her hands trembling. What do you mean? This can't be right. Vernon Walsh is your real father, I said gently. He and your mother had an affair 24 years ago, and I've been raising you thinking you were mine. Colton put his arm around Sierra as tears started streaming down her face. That's impossible. Vernon's my grandfather. He's Mom's stepfather, which makes it even worse. Willow Walsh spoke up, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. My son seduced his own stepdaughter and then let another man raise his child. I'm ashamed to call him family. Sierra looked between us, her world crumbling in real time. You've known about this? All of you. I just found out a week ago, I said. Right after your wedding. Vernon's toast made me suspicious, so I got the DNA test done. The wedding, Sierra whispered. 4 years you worked to pay for my wedding, and I'm not even your daughter. I knelt in front of her, taking her hands in mine. Listen to me carefully, Sierra. Biology doesn't determine who your father is. Love does. Sacrifice does. Being there for every scraped knee, every school play, every milestone in your life. That's what makes me your dad. Vernon contributed DNA. I contributed everything else. She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. You have nothing to be sorry for, I said firmly. This is on Vernon and your mother, not you. Willow wheeled closer to us. Sierra, honey, I want you to know that Vernon's crimes go far deeper than just lying about paternity. He's been stealing from the city, cheating on his taxes, manipulating women for years. You're better off without him in your life. Where is he now? Colton asked. Federal marshals arrested him this morning, I said. Tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy. He's looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Sierra pulled back to look at me. What about us? What about our family? You're my daughter, I said without hesitation. Colton's my son-in-law. That doesn't change. The only thing that changes is that we don't have to pretend Vernon and your mother are part of our family anymore. 8 months later, I stood in my backyard watching Sierra and Colton plant a vegetable garden where Nora's flower beds used to be. It was a crisp April morning, the kind that promises better days ahead. The divorce had been finalized in February. Nora kept her car and enough money to start over somewhere else. I heard she'd moved to Austin to live with her sister. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and most importantly, my dignity. Vernon was serving his sentence at a federal facility in Beaumont, his reputation destroyed, his assets seized by the government. Sierra handled the revelation about her parentage better than I'd expected. After the initial shock wore off, she seemed almost relieved to understand why certain family dynamics had never felt quite right. She'd cut contact with Nora entirely, but maintained a relationship with me that felt stronger than ever. Dad, she called from the garden. Where do you want the tomatoes? Wherever you think they'll get the most sun, I replied, marveling at how normal that felt. The word dad had taken on new meaning, not because of shared genetics, but because of shared choice. Garrett had tried to reach out several times, but I wasn't ready for that conversation. Maybe someday we'd repair our relationship, but trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. For now, I was focusing on the family that had chosen to stand by me. Willow Walsh had become an unexpected ally and friend. At 89, she was sharper than most people half her age, and her contempt for her son's actions had created an unlikely bond between us. She'd started spending Sunday dinners with us, regaling Sierra with stories about the Walsh family history that didn't include Vernon's crimes. The investigator, Jake Martinez, had become something of a legend in Houston legal circles. The Vernon Walsh case had led to a broader investigation of municipal corruption that netted 3 city council members and 2 construction company executives. Jake's phone was ringing constantly with new clients. As for me, I'd gone back to working just one job. Turned out, when you're not supporting a lying wife and funding elaborate deceptions, you don't need quite as much money. I'd started taking evening classes at Houston Community College, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. The oil refinery felt different now. Not like a prison sentence, but like honest work that paid for an honest life. You know what I've been thinking? Sierra said, walking over with dirt on her hands and a smile on her face. What's that, sweetheart? I want to change my last name. Legally. From Walsh back to Reed. Vernon Walsh doesn't deserve to have his name attached to me anymore. I felt something in my chest that might have been pride, or relief, or maybe just love. You sure about that? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You're my real father, and I want the world to know it. Looking at her standing there in the sunlight, covered in garden soil and radiating determination, I realized something important. Sometimes the worst betrayal can lead to the most honest truth. Vernon and Nora had stolen years from me, but they'd also given me something invaluable, absolute clarity about what really matters. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice, commitment, and love that survives even when the foundation shakes.